John Charles Larmony is our feature this evening for Black History Month. Melissa Gumbs queries the bidding process at the Princess Juliana International Airport. And Minister of Health says that there are indeed some questions regarding the guidelines for the vaccine rollout. Those are the headlines for Wednesday, February the 17th, 2021. Good evening, viewers. This is SXM Daily News, and I'm Valerie Van Putten. Before we get started in our newscast this evening, I would like to apologize for not having a newscast on Monday and Tuesday. This was due to technical difficulties experienced at our studios, which was beyond our control. But as usual, we have a full newscast for you this evening, so let's get started. In our first story, with the rollout of the vaccines, which has finally arrived on the island, and the administering of said vaccines, Minister of Health, the Honorable Richard Panafleck, in responding to questions from reporters at this morning's Council of Ministers weekly press briefing, and about the guidelines of the recently published antigen tests, and why haven't government included SLS, which is a government agency, to work with the lab in Simpson Bay. The minister says that there are indeed some questions regarding the guidelines, and he expounded further.
Indeed, there is some questions and concerning the guideline. First of all, I want to make it clear, inspectorate of any ministry works independent to carry out their jobs. They are not the ones that state any laws, but they are the ones that control that all the laws are being adhered to. Secondly, guidelines are something that seems to be new, but guideline is what, like they say, is policy that have to be followed, brings clarity to the position, what will be checked on, and what you have to adhere to. The situation that is here, that was brought again in Parliament yesterday, I will have to say that we will look into it again to see what are the points of constraint. As you might know, I had to come this morning. I had some meetings, but I didn't get to SLS to check with them also what is the issue concerning and what are they, if they are charging, why they are doing it for it. So I have the answers. I will get back to with that as soon as possible. What I know as so far is this point of care, well, because point of cares are the facilities, either pharmacies of general practitioners that pick up to them to do the testing, which amplify the amount of locations where it's testing, that you don't have to get information coming in, where pictures with people standing in line and so on, and then they complaining about all those kind of things. So to facilitate more locations, there are general practitioners that do it. And what I have understood so far and the information getting is, except of maybe some, most of them or all of them agree and are following the guidelines. There are laws that you have to follow, and you have to make sure that everything is being done the correct way.
And in other news at this time, the House of Parliament sat in a Central Committee meeting on Monday, February the 15th, 2021, with the shareholder representative of the Princess Juliana International Airport. The Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport and Telecommunication, the Honorable Ludmila de Wever, was in attendance and gave an update on the reconstruction project at the airport terminal and the operational projections for 2021. The meeting was requested by MP C.A. Buncamper, MP G.S. Heiliger Martin, MP R. Bryson, MP A.E. Arundel, and MP C.T. Emmanuel. In this evening's broadcast, you will hear from the Minister of TEA, the Honorable Ludmila de Wever, who gave a PowerPoint presentation about the shares of the Princess Juliana International Airport And you will also hear from the Chief Executive Officer of the airport, Mr. Brian Mingo, who gave a general update on the recovery since the reopening of the airport back in July of 2020, the status of the airport, as well as the travel protocols, which are still changing.
The country of St. Martin is 100% shareholder of the PGIAH, which is the holding company, which is also an NV. PGIAH is also 100% shareholder of Princess Juliana International Airport operating. And we refer to as holding, operating, PGIAE as operating. Country St. Martin granted a concession to PGIAE, whereas the holding company leases assets to PGIAE or operating company. Therefore, PGIAE pays the lease to a holding. That actually covers both agenda points 1 and 2 in terms of the overall structure and management of the assets of the company of holding and operating. So before I continue, I would like to call up Mr. Brian Mingo, who will give us a presentation.
I have around 15 sheets where I can give an overview of the status of the airport, and I have the following agenda, which can... St. Martin and the airport PGIA has shown recovery since our opening in July, of course, July 2020. Market response has been slow. If you look at the figures in December, it's around 30%, but relatively we have done well. The travel protocols are still changing every week, and it's something an upkeep we have to keep in views. Right now, for instance, the United States on outbound, you also have to do testings. The scenarios we had for forecasting, we also update these accordingly because of the limited cash in the scenario that we have today. And also the major reconstruction progress, we've also booked progress on this as we go along. And I want to make note that the airport, we're the only airport that is handling a double crisis in the sense of the COVID-19 as well as the reconstruction. All other major airports have cancelled or even deferred their capital programs. So we have numerous examples of this. Okay, looking at the figures, if you see, I wonder if this has a laser. If you look at the top graph, which is the blue graph, that shows you the passenger numbers of 2019. And then, of course, the red graph is 2020, where you saw in April it completely went to zero after the shutdown of the COVID. If you look at the last 3 months of 2020, which is the red graph, I wonder if this has a laser. No, it doesn't. You'll see October, November, December. That is the dotted line. It's something that this graph is a few months old, so we kind of looked and to see and compared it with reality. So this is where we started the forecast. And if you look at the forecast, we're quite on with the actuals for October, November, December. What we did is also, if you look at the green projections as well as the purple one, they project the year 2021. And because of the new restrictions, it's kind of leaning towards the purple one, and we have updated this accordingly. So those two graphs represents 2021, and it has an annual average of 50% of what happened in 2019.
And in more news regarding the airport, at the Central Committee meeting on Monday last, CEO of the Princess Juliana International Airport, Mr. Brian Mingo, explained the progress in his PowerPoint presentation. Mr. Mingo spoke about the projected timeline of the completion of the terminal building, and he gave an extensive report about the bidding process and public tender process.
We've put together the funding for the project. It's close to 107 million, and we've started this project. And the timelines of this project, of course, we've put up here now on screen. And right now the pre-works are taking place, mold remediation and waste disposal. This is also gutting the whole building and doing the demolition works. That is going on till April. We're on schedule and on budget. Eventually, June 2021, whereas the main works will start, and that will take around 22 months, completing in March 2023. Some of the highlights of what has been signed and what have been done: the sprinkler refurbishment contract, environmental contract with farmers, supervising engineer also using local subcontractors of ICE as well as SEC, and of course the mold remediation, which I just mentioned, and the waste disposal by AAR Incorporating using 3 local contractors: Tidal Wave, Caribbean ANC, and also St. Martin Recycling. The big question: why does bidding process takes time? In our case, the insurance proceeds released as well as the World Bank and AIB effective this letter only took place in April 2020. I want to be very clear on that because some dates shift, but this only happened April of last year. So the bidding process that we had can only start after we have these funds available. Not in draft form, not in contractual form. The effectiveness letter is where it activates the actual loan. After that, St. Martin closed the airspace in April to July 2020. So of course also restricting all kind of access and travel. And this is not only on St. Martin, this also happened globally because the bidders requested extension through this same phenomenon because they had global restrictions. A lot of the factories, a lot of the offices, a lot of the sub-suppliers, they were closed, and a reason for also some of the delays that we see today. Although there's lots of interest from the potential bidders, it resulted in many questions and clarification, also because their access coming to St. Martin was limited. We even went so far that we had a 3D movie made of the airport where they could have done a virtual walkthrough. Now, an important point to also consider, what we're going through right now is a public tender process, and it requires that certain clarifications are included in the amendments of the bidding document. In a nutshell, we need to safeguard the integrity of this process, and that's a crucial part here. And this is to avoid that we have claims of some of the bidders after the fact. After we have awarded it, and that will even create further delays. And we have enough examples of that happening here in St. Martin. So furthermore, by adjusting the bid submission date, we reduce the chance that bidders translate risk and uncertainty also in higher bid quotations. If a bidder gives a price and the vendor has not given any response, they will do estimates, and this, of course, relates to higher bidding numbers.
And still to come, Member of Parliament for the U.S. Party elucidates on the bidding process of projects at the Princess Juliana International Airport. I'll have the details to that story and much more when SXM Daily News returns.
Hi, I'm Switch.
And I'm Save.
And together we're here
to tell you about WIB, Switch, and Save mortgage offer.
Now at WIB, you can save and benefit from great specials when you decide
to bring your mortgage to WIB.
When you switch, WIB will offer you
payment of penalty fees up to 3 months interest,
payment of notary fees,
waive of bank closing fees,
and also the lowest interest rate.
Plus, you'll have the chance to win back 1 year of interest payment.
Visit any of WIB's mortgage specialists and benefit from WIB's Switch and
Hey, that's my part. And Save mortgage offer.
WIB, your partner in progress.
And welcome back, viewers. You're watching SXM Daily News, and I'm Valerie Van Putten. As we continue now in more news, still at the parliamentary meeting of Monday last, February the 15th, Member of Parliament, the Honorable Claudius Boncamper, elucidated to the bidding process of the project at the airport. The Member of Parliament said that he was unpleasantly surprised by the presentation, as he comes from a ministry that knows what bidding is, and what he saw on Monday last was not bidding.
But I was unpleasantly surprised by the presentation. And my questioning is going to touch on exactly some of these things, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I come from a ministry where we know what bidding means. And what I saw up here today is not what bidding is. This is when you start to play with bidding. This is when you start to maneuver with bidding. This is not bidding. This is not how a tender works. Some people might be afraid to say these things, but I am not. I'm being accused, for God's sakes, of knowing what to do and what not to do. So let's be frank when we talk about the integrity of a bid. Mr. Chairman, I need to understand who was handling the bidding locally during the period of April 2020 to July 2020, because it was closed down and nobody could get in. So I would assume all the experts that are on payroll to handle this bidding were not here. So who handled the bidding in those 2 months? Or did it just stop? Mr. Chairman, I see them talking about safeguarding the integrity of the World Bank and ensuring that everyone has a chance to get information or additional information to incorporate it in their bids. And for such clarifications are asked. Now, I understand clarifications are a very normal something in a bid. But if additional time was granted for such, then there must be a reason for such. Because I believe everyone can fly into St. Martin since July or August of last year. So I just need to verify why the delay in the whole bidding that's ongoing. We are now at approximately 119 million instead of 107 million as was projected in 2018. And that has to do with various indexations that were indicated, price indexation, scope, updating of scope indexation, detailing designs indexation of 3%. Did the design change? Did we update requirements in such an extent that it justifies 3% updating in the price or in the overall price? 12 million is a big amount. And while it might not be needed, at this point in time, it's going to need to be found and ensure that it's there in the event the numbers come out different. So, Mr. Chairman, that was just some things that I needed to ask fast because I didn't understand how that took place in the presentation, and since we just got it, I was not able to ask those questions in the questions that I have prepared.
Meanwhile, Member of Parliament for the PFP party, the Honourable Melissa Gums, also queried the bidding process at the airport. The Member of Parliament said she wanted to start with the corporate governance bid, and she fired off her questions. She said that it is important that they get some clarity about the role that good corporate governance has to play in this ongoing situation. And she expounded further.
I'll start with the corporate governance bid first, since I believe it's important we get some clarity about the role that good corporate governance has to play in this ongoing situation. So through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Minister, has the World Bank been involved in any aspect of corporate governance related to the airport? If so, could you please explain how and when? And if so, was there a report issued? And if there was, which, considering how the World Bank conducts itself, I assume there is, could copies be sent to Parliament? Were there conditions set by the Dutch government, the European Investment Bank, or the World Bank for the approval of the loans? And if there were, what were these conditions? Was changing the corporate governance situation at the airport part of the conditions? And if so, how was this meant to be done? Was the approval of the loan contingent on further conditions or requirements? And if so, what are these? Is it true that plans were drafted for the improvement of corporate governance at the airport? Minister, through you, Mr. Chair. And if so, please indicate the state of the plans and if these plans can be shared with Parliament. And finally, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, but I guess also for the CEO, regarding the enplanement scenarios in your presentation, both base and pessimistic, could you explain why 2019 numbers were used as a baseline instead of 2016? So pre-IRMA, 2019 was still relatively low, to my opinion, so considering residual effects of IRMA, so I would assume that 2016 would be a more accurate baseline. So I ask these questions because we keep circling back to a couple words I've said a few times on the floor of Parliament, and those words are new reality. There are many who don't live in it and would prefer to continue to mentally at least exist in the old reality. The reactions to the letter sent to the Prime Minister by the World Bank actually surprised me. If you spend time in certain areas of the private sector, such a letter is a general expectation when major changes are being proposed in a situation where there's a significant amount of money involved. Good corporate governance is the cornerstone of any respectable and reputable financing arrangement between two or more parties. Risk management and risk mitigation are the pillars that help ensure and maintain good corporate governance. Minister De Wever, having come from the same finance world I used to work in, will understand this better than most. So I'm not sure what anyone, particularly the architects of the current crusade of this airport holding board, expected to happen. Or maybe it's exactly what was intended to happen. So it brings me to this much talked about letter received then by members of the airport holding board, the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Minister of TEAT, and the President of Parliament. I would assume, Mr. Chair, that you yourself were included as more of an FYI, as I hope the intention is not to have the legislative body of the country interfere in the decisions of the executive. That in itself undermines good corporate governance, as it is the type of mingling that my colleague MP Peterson warns about often. And it is, quite frankly, the type of mingling that has caused many of the issues at pretty much every government-owned company that we are seeing today. So the chickens keep coming home to roost, so to speak.
And now, as we continue to honor our local heroes for Black History Month, this evening we will pay tribute to Mr. John Larmeny. The text was taken from the book, The Politicians Who Made a Difference, 50 Movers and Shakers by Kenneth Cook. Many people remember John Charles Larmeny from the number of years he spent leading the Phillipsburg Community Brass Band. Mr. Larmeny was very involved in many other organizations. He was born in 1900 on St. Martin. For the next 3 decades, he worked in various fields and countries. In the Dominican Republic, he labored in the cane fields. He also developed and honed his musical talents throughout his travels. Curaçao was the second island where he worked. There, he was employed by Isla, the oil refinery, before becoming a police officer. His ascension to the rank of brigadier came rather quickly. Mr. Larmeny also worked in this capacity on Aruba, Bonaire, Saba, St. Eustatius, and St. Martin. When he returned to St. Martin, he opened a grocery store sometime around 1954. Claude Watty urged Mr. Larmeny to enter politics. In the 1955 Island Council elections, he was candidate number 4. He mustered some 19 votes. He was appointed to the Island Council, where he served until 1963. Clem LaBega remembered Mr. Larmeny as being customarily silent, but able to make an impact on the political history of the island. For example, during his first term, Mr. John Larmeny supported a motion by the Executive Council that regulated the leasing of government property. He also supported Mr. LaBega's efforts in promoting the island as a tourist destination. In 1963, Mr. Larmeny ran in the Island Council election one more time and obtained some 12 votes. After the election, Mr. Larmeny returned to leading his brass band. Mr. John Charles Larmeny died in 1978 at the age of 78. Now, turning to our weather forecast for February the 17th, 2021, a tight surface pressure gradient will maintain brisk winds and rough seas across the local area. Patches of clouds embedded in the wind flow will generate a few isolated showers. Breezy conditions will aid in keeping seas elevated over the next few days. Seas can be expected to peak up to 10 feet. As a result, small craft operators and sea bathers should continue to exercise caution. A small craft advisory will remain in effect for St. Martin. So the outlook through Friday midday, fair to partly cloudy and breezy with brief showers possible. And still to come, statue of Wantete Loke restored and will be unveiled on Thursday. I'll have the details to that story and more when SXM Daily News returns.
innovative Banco-Matico contactless smart card. Your Banco-Matico smart card is now equipped with a contactless feature for payments, so get ready to tap and go. Contactless payments are fast, easy, secure, and accepted worldwide at all Maestro-enabled contactless terminals. Tap for transactions equivalent to or less than 100 NAF, or the US dollar equivalent. You will receive notifications via email anytime you tap. Tap, tap, and pay fast with WIB. For more information, visit our website at wib-bank.net. Tap and go with your partner in progress.
Welcome back, viewers. On Friday last, the 12th of February 2021, the Court of Appeals of Aruba, Curaçao, St. Martin, and the BES Islands, the court, ordered the prosecution of an individual with political authority on St. Martin. The order relates exclusively to a limited number of crimes of which he is suspected. Based on the Constitution of St. Martin and the national ordinances for the prosecution of individuals with political authority, the Public Prosecutor's Office can only prosecute individuals with political authority after an order to that effect has been issued by the court. Further to the results of an extensive criminal investigation codenamed Ruby, carried out since July of 2018 by the Ereste investigation team under authority of the Anti-Corruption Task Force of the Public Prosecutor's Office, the TBO, the Public Prosecutor's Office submitted a request for such order in May of 2020. The Ruby investigation focuses, among other things, on criminal acts related to the tendering process of contracts for the management of the landfill in St. Martin. Alleged mismanagement of the landfill may have resulted in health risks for the community of St. Martin. The suspicion, as far as aforementioned political authority is concerned, focuses particularly on administrative corruption like the acceptance of bribes, abuse of authority, forgery, and the misuse of public funds for personal purposes. The court is of the opinion that there are sufficient grounds for the suspicion of the individual in relation to the aforementioned crimes, and in other words, that the suspicion is substantiated furthermore. The court ruled that the Public Prosecutor's Office did not act lightly when deciding to submit its request to further prosecute the suspect. Also, according to the court, there is no question of political motives that form the basis for submitting such request. Finally, there are no grounds of general interest that should lead to the refusal of the request by the Public Prosecutor's Office. As a result of last Friday's ruling, the Public Prosecutor's Office is preparing the next phase of the Ruby investigation, the phase in which the suspect will be summoned to appear before a criminal judge. And as we end this edition of SXM Daily News for this evening, the Juan Tete Loke statue, which was damaged during the Hurricane Irma back in 2017 and removed a couple of months later from its location, and given the importance of Juan Tete Loke's cultural heritage history, the Foundation Community Aid Century Hill funded the restoration of the statue to its original state. The statue was restored by its creator, Mike Magiro. As such, the Foundation Community Aid Century Hill is inviting the general public and the entire community to attend the restoration ceremony of the Juan Tete Loke statue and are therefore looking forward to your attendance. It will be held tomorrow, Thursday, February the 18th, 2021, at 3 p.m. at the Juan Tete Loke roundabout, which is the Bel Air Cahill roundabout. The Minister of Education, Youth, Sport, and Culture, the Honorable Rodolphe Samuel, will be present. And with that, viewers, it brings us to the end of this edition of SXM Daily News for this evening. I am Valerie Van Putten. Thank you so much for joining me. And just a reminder that this and other programs are available online. Simply log on to stmartinmediacenter.com for viewing. And on behalf of the SXM Daily News team, we thank you so much for watching and plan on meeting you right back here again tomorrow.